Authentic desire cannot be manufactured, it is felt, not forced. In a world obsessed with appearances, many women are taught to seduce with a surface, the perfect body, the perfect smile, the perfect timing. But real men, the kind who have lived, lost, evolved, don't fall for the performance. They fall for something far deeper: presence. This presence is not about perfection. It's about energy, the kind of energy that says, I am here. I have nothing to prove. I have chosen myself. And it's this inner claiming, this grounded authenticity, that awakens something visceral in the masculine heart. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And that's the truth. A man is not moved by the woman who performs desire. He is transformed by the woman who embodies it. To embody desire is not to chase attention, manipulate outcomes, or apply tricks. It's to walk into a room, into a moment, and simply be fully anchored in your own energy, your own value, your own truth. The feminine that calls to the mature masculine is not loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't seduce from lack. It radiates from within. Think of it like this: real desire doesn't spark from a script. It's born in the subtle, in how you look at him without rushing, in how you hold your own body with reverence, in how you speak with both clarity and silence, in how your energy says, I am not here to be chosen. I have already chosen myself. This is why presence is more magnetic than any strategy could ever be. When a man is emotionally available, no longer trapped in shallow conquest or ego-driven pursuit, he senses energy. He reads depth. He is drawn not to what you do, but to who you are. And if he feels he can rest near your essence, he will return again and again, not out of need, but out of recognition. The most irresistible woman isn't always the most perfect. She's the most real. Her presence is quiet, but undeniable. Her energy doesn't shout, but it fills the room. She knows that her power lies not in what she shows, but in what she feels without apology. And that is the root of authentic desire. When someone looks at you and senses you are not seeking anything from them, but simply inviting them into the truth of who you are. That kind of woman is unforgettable, not because she tried to be, but because her presence left an imprint. So no real desire can't be summoned with scripts. It doesn't bloom in manipulation. It grows in the soil of honesty. And if you want to be desired deeply, don't try to be impressive. Be true. Be grounded. Be wildly present in your own body, your own heart, your own moment, because that not perfection, not effort, not control is the language of lasting attraction. Real connection doesn't begin with chemistry, it begins with emotional availability. You can share laughter stories, even passion with someone, and still feel unseen, untouched, at the level that matters most, the soul. And that's because true intimacy isn't built on shared interests. It's built on shared presence. A man who is emotionally available has lived through enough to know what matters. He is no longer chasing validation through conquest. He no longer fears his own depth. He wants something different, a connection, where he doesn't have to armor up, filter himself, or constantly prove that he's worthy. What he longs for is a space where he can finally just be. And when he meets a woman who holds space, not with pressure, but with presence, something in him softens. Not out of weakness, but from recognition. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that he can let his guard down, not because she demands it, but because she doesn't. Emotional availability isn't about constant talking, sharing every feeling, or being dramatic. It's about being able to stand in your own truth while also holding a space for someone else's. It's about letting a man feel seen without trying to fix or change him. Carl Jung said the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And it's just as true in love, because for a man to open, he must first feel that who he is, shadow and all, is not a threat, but an invitation. And the woman who creates that space becomes unforgettable to him. Not because she asks him to show up, but because he wants to. Because with her, his essence is not only allowed, it's welcomed. That kind of connection cannot exist if either person is emotionally closed. You cannot build intimacy on fear. You cannot grow love through control. Emotional availability means you're not relating from your wounds, you're relating from your wholeness. And that changes everything. When you're emotionally present, you don't need to chase. You don't need to ask for reassurance every time there's silence. You don't feel the urge to test his feelings or manipulate his reactions. Why? Because you're not acting from fear. You're acting from truth. And that energy, calm-rooted, self-aware, is what draws an emotionally available man closer. Not because he has to carry you, but because he senses that with you, he can carry himself more fully. In that space, both people breathe easier. There's no game, no guessing. Just energy that flows, words that feel safe, and silence that doesn't scream with anxiety. If you want a relationship that lasts, don't look for perfect words or constant attention. Look for presence. Look for a man who can stay with himself and with you in moments that feel vulnerable. And become the kind of woman who doesn't demand that he bare his soul, but who creates a sanctuary where he chooses to do so. Because in the end, the most powerful connections are not built through performance. They are built in stillness, in presence, in two people who are emotionally ready not to complete each other, but to meet each other where they already are. And that's where real love begins. There's something profound that happens when a man feels seen for who he is, not just what he does. In a world that constantly measures men by their output, their achievements, their toughness, their ability to provide, few are ever acknowledged for their essence. And yet, it is that quiet, often unseen part of him that longs most to be recognized. This is where the power of what we call mental nicknames begins. Mental nicknames are not compliments. They are not strategies. They are invitations, elegant, truthful acknowledgments of who a man is beneath the surface. They don't flatter the ego, they awaken the soul. Because what ignites real desire in a man is not being admired for his image, but being recognized for his identity. When you tell a man you always know how to hold it together, when everything else falls apart, you're not just praising him. You're naming something he values about himself, something the world may never have acknowledged out loud. In that moment, you're not performing desire. You're activating it. Carl Jung wrote, "The unconscious of one contains the image of the other." What this means is when you recognize a man from a deep place of presence, when your words reflect what he already carries but rarely shows you, become a mirror. And not just any mirror, but the kind that reveals his most noble impulse. Each mental nickname holds an archetype. Natural protector. When you name a man's instinct to protect, not out of neediness, but from trust, he doesn't just feel useful, he feels essential. You awaken the part of him that wants to stand taller, show up stronger, not to prove anything, but to offer something real, untamable. This is for the man who cannot be boxed in, who carries wildfire and fierce individuality. When you say there's something in you that won't bow and that challenges me, you're not trying to contain him. You're inviting him to express himself fully. And that is the most seductive thing he's ever felt. Man of steel and calm. These men don't shout their strengths. They carry it in a silence. When you say, your presence calms me more than any words ever could, you reflect a part of him that most people overlook, the stability he holds in chaos. That's when he knows you truly see me. Calm and mystery in person. For the man who reveals himself slowly, who is drawn to depth, not drama. You don't need to chase him. You only need to name the presence he carries and let it unfold. Mental nicknames work not because they make him feel desired physically, but because they restore something sacred in him, the sense that who he truly is when fully present is enough. And that's what today's men crave. Not more applause, not more pressure, but the kind of attention that doesn't demand, it invites. The kind that doesn't say, be more, but quietly affirms, I see you already are. In that energy, desire becomes more than physical. It becomes emotional, spiritual, lasting. So don't just tell a man he's strong. Tell him how his strength makes you feel safe. Don't just say he's attractive. Tell him why his quiet depth makes you want to stay longer in his presence. These are not lines to be memorized. They are truths to be lived. Because the moment a man feels truly recognized is the moment he begins to truly desire. Feminine power has nothing to do with noise and everything to do with presence. In a culture that often tells women to be louder, sexier, more impressive, there is something disarmingly magnetic about a woman who is simply at peace with herself. A woman who doesn't beg to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. This kind of woman doesn't seduce from urgency. She doesn't seek validation with her voice. Her power comes from a silence that speaks louder than any words, a kind of stillness that draws a man closer, not because she demands it, but because her energy invites it. She knows who she is. She moves through the world with calm, not because she's indifferent, but because she is centered. And that, to an emotionally available man, the kind who has stopped chasing trophies and started craving truth, is deeply, irresistibly attractive. Carl Jung spoke of the anima as the inner feminine force that guides a man toward wholeness. But for that to happen, the woman must first embody her own wholeness, not by being perfect, but by being true. And that truth isn't loud. It doesn't push. It doesn't plead. It simply is. There's a quiet revolution in a woman who doesn't use her femininity to manipulate, but uses it to hold space. She listens without losing herself. She stays present without becoming passive. She allows a man to lead, sometimes not because she can't, but because she knows real power is in choosing when to surrender. A woman in her calm power doesn't try to fix a man. She doesn't analyze his every move or demand his transformation. Instead, she becomes a mirror, one that reflects not his flaws, but his potential, not by force, but by presence. And in that reflection, something deep inside him awakens, not just desire, but devotion. She doesn't say, prove your love to me. Her energy says, you are safe to be fully yourself here. She doesn't say, protect me so I can feel strong. Her calm whispers, I already am strong, but with you I rest. This is the feminine that men of depth crave. Not the woman who tries to be everything, but the woman who dares to be herself. And that power isn't flashy. It's not on display. It doesn't come from achievements, titles, or external validation. It comes from within, from emotional regulation, from self-trust, from deep alignment with her own truth. She knows that when she breathes slowly, when she speaks with intention, when she meets his gaze without anxiety, she is more compelling than any script, any outfit, any perfect reply, because presence, real grounded, heart-open presence, is rare. And the man who has matured emotionally will recognize it the moment he feels it. He won't want to possess it, he'll want to honor it. So if you want to awaken a deeper kind of desire, don't try harder, don't perform, don't chase, return to your center. Because when you are rooted in your own clarity, your own calm, your own energy, you become the kind of woman who doesn't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You already are. And that is the kind of woman who not only ignites desire, she becomes unforgettable. Desire is not just a feeling, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, we don't just see the other. We see ourselves, the parts we know, the parts we hide, and the parts we haven't yet dared to love. This is where Carl Jung's work becomes not just psychology but poetry. Jung taught that within every man is an anima, the inner feminine image, and within every woman an animus, the inner masculine. These aren't ideas meant to live only in books. They live in the quiet spaces between two people, in a gaze that lingers longer than expected, in the way someone's presence touches something you've buried, not because it hurts, but because it matters. When a man meets a woman who embodies the essence of his inner feminine, he doesn't just desire her, he recognizes her. She reflects not only what he wants, but what he needs to become. And the same is true for her. Their chemistry, their fire, isn't random. It's archetypal. It's alchemical. That's why real desire isn't just about attraction. It's about integration. When a woman holds her ground in feminine energy, receptive, intuitive, whole, she becomes a living invitation for the man to embrace the parts of himself he's long neglected: softness, vulnerability, emotional truth. And when he accepts that invitation, desire becomes not a chase, but a homecoming. This is why you may find yourself drawn to someone you can't quite explain. Someone who triggers you, challenges you, even frustrates you. It's not always dysfunction. Sometimes it's your unconscious calling you back to wholeness. Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In the dance of masculine and feminine energies, we don't just meet another person, we meet ourselves. And when both people are willing to stay present, to not run from the shadow, to not hide behind ego, something extraordinary happens. They individuate together. Individuation in Jungian terms is the journey of becoming fully oneself, not by cutting off parts of who we are, but by integrating them. And romantic relationships, when conscious, become powerful arenas for this transformation. But here's the catch. This only works when both people are emotionally available. You cannot awaken someone who is committed to sleeping, and you cannot offer your soul to someone who only wants your surface. This is why spiritual chemistry is rare, because it requires courage. Courage to see your own projections. Courage to hold someone else's intensity without shrinking. Courage to say, I will not fix you, but I will see you fully. In that space, desire becomes sacred. Not the desire to possess, not the desire to impress, but the desire to meet soul to soul, shadow to shadow, light to light. So if you're wondering why you're so drawn to someone who sees you more clearly than others ever have, it may be because your psyche knows this person is not here to complete you, but to reflect you. And that reflection, if you let, it will change everything. Because in the end, as Jung reminded us, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And who we become often begins with who we dare to love. There's a world of difference between needing a man and recognizing him. One binds him, the other frees him. And if you truly want to awaken deep soul-level desire in a man who has matured not just in years, but in self-awareness, it begins with this simple but powerful truth. Men don't want to be needed. They want to be seen. Many women are taught that if you show your vulnerability, if you appear helpless or emotionally fragile, a man will step in, save you, and stay. But the truth is, that kind of need may attract him temporarily, but it doesn't hold him, it doesn't inspire him, it drains him. What does awaken him and anchor him is recognition, not praise, not flattery, not dependence, but the subtle, sincere acknowledgement of the man he is when he's not performing, when he's not posturing, when he's simply showing up from a place of quiet integrity. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists, but what you look at and accept begins to change." The same goes for men. When a woman looks at a man and instead of molding him, simply mirrors him with reverence, something sacred happens. He begins to expand. Imagine this moment. He helps you through something stressful. You don't crumble or beg. You don't say, "I don't know what I'd do without you," with trembling weakness. Instead, you look at him and say with calm certainty, "The way you stayed grounded through that, it was powerful. I felt safe the moment you stepped in." That's not manipulation. That's honoring his essence. And when a man feels that who he is, when he's most himself is noticed, he doesn't just feel desired, he feels essential. This is the kind of recognition that speaks not to his ego, but to his identity. And yes, there is a delicate line between recognition and neediness. One lifts him, the other leans on him. One says, "I see you and trust you." The other says, "I need you because I can't hold myself." And though both may sound similar, the energy is completely different. Men sense it instantly, especially emotionally available men, the ones who have done their inner work, who are no longer seduced by chaos, who crave a partner, not a project. These men aren't looking to rescue someone. They're looking for a woman who respects the man they've become and reflects it back without demand. So if you want to be unforgettable, don't perform need. Radiate clarity. Let your energy say, "I could walk this path alone, but I choose to walk beside you because I trust the way you hold space." That sentence, even when unspoken, becomes the invisible thread that ties desire to devotion. Because when a man feels honored, not for what he gives, but for who he is, he begins to desire not just your body, but your energy, your steadiness, your way of seeing him without trying to control him. And that in this world where so many feel unseen or expected to perform is one of the rarest and most magnetic gifts you can offer. So stop trying to be needed. Start being true. And let your recognition of his quiet strength become the invitation that awakens not his obligation, but his fire. A man who values his freedom isn't afraid of love, he's afraid of being controlled. And there's a crucial difference. It's not commitment that scares him. It's losing the essence of who he is in the process of loving someone else. And for the kind of man who has walked through fire to know himself, freedom is not negotiable, it's sacred. But here's the paradox. Even the most untamable man wants to be seen. He may resist being boxed in, but he deeply longs to be witnessed, not managed, not molded, but met. Met with presence, with passion, with a kind of understanding that doesn't require taming him to love him. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. For a man, part of that journey is learning to integrate his wildness with his wisdom. But that doesn't happen in isolation. Often it's catalyzed by a woman who holds enough of her own inner fire that she's not threatened by his. She doesn't try to contain him. She reflects him. She doesn't soften his edges. She respects them. She doesn't say, stay close or I'll feel abandoned. She says, go if you need to. I'm not here to trap you. I'm here because I choose you, not because I need to hold you still. That's the energy that disarms an untamable man. That's the gaze he remembers. Because for once, someone didn't try to shrink him to feel safe. Someone met his intensity with her own. When you love a man like this, you don't need to outmatch his fire. You need to trust your own. You need to stand in your truth with such fullness that you don't chase him. When he pulls away, you hold your ground. You fill your own space. You breathe. And when he returns, not out of guilt, but out of gravity, you don't say, where have you been? You say with your eyes, I'm still here. I never needed to chase you to be whole. This kind of woman, the one who doesn't try to possess, but who inspires, is unforgettable to a man who lives from his soul. She becomes the place where his freedom is not compromised, but cherished. She becomes the mirror where he doesn't lose himself, but finds himself more clearly. It's not that he doesn't want closeness, he does, deeply, but it has to be chosen, voluntary, free. And so many relationships fall apart because we try to turn desire into obligation. But real desire cannot be contained. It must be met. It must be seen and celebrated, not scheduled and suffocated. The truth is, the more a woman trusts herself, the more she allows a man to trust her. Not because she convinces him, but because she's not afraid of his rhythm. She doesn't ask him to dim. She asks him to burn fully. So if you're with a man whose spirit feels vast, intense, even overwhelming, don't try to hold him. Hold yourself and let your grounded presence say, you don't need to shrink to stay. You can be everything you are and I'll still choose to stand here with you. That's not control. That's not fear. That's love in its highest form. And that, for a man who's tasted freedom, is the only kind of love worth staying for. Mystery is not about hiding, it's about revealing slowly with depth and intention. In today's culture of instant gratification and oversharing, there's something profoundly magnetic about a woman who doesn't lay all her cards on the table. Not out of fear, not as a strategy, but because she knows she's layered. And those layers are not for everyone. This kind of woman doesn't rush to be understood. She allows herself to be discovered. And that discovery becomes a journey not just into her, but into the man who dares to truly see her. Carl Jung said, only that which has not yet become conscious can be projected. That's the essence of mystery. When you don't immediately explain yourself, when your energy invites curiosity, instead of demanding attention, you allow someone to project something deeper, something archetypal. You become not a puzzle to be solved, but a mirror to be met. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about being so deeply in touch with yourself that you don't feel the need to constantly explain, prove, or perform. You let your stillness do the speaking. Your presence becomes a quiet invitation. And emotionally available men, the kind who crave more than surface, are drawn to this energy like moths to flame, not because it withholds, but because it resonates. It awakens the part of them that wants to explore, to pursue, to feel their own depth through the way you hold yours. When a woman carries mystery, she doesn't do it to be elusive. She does it because she knows that the most sacred parts of her soul are not given, they are earned. Not with pressure, but with patience. Not through demand, but through devotion. Picture this, you're in a room with him. No performance, no pretending. You're simply there, composed, calm, radiant in your own stillness. You're not rushing to fill the silence. You're not over-explaining your thoughts. You let the space between words breathe. And then, at just the right moment, you say something honest, piercing, and real, just enough to open a door, not flood the room. That moment becomes unforgettable. Not because of what you said, but because of how you held yourself before and after saying it. That's what mystery is. It's the space you don't fill, the emotion you allow him to feel without dictating the meaning, the subtle pause before a truth, the look that holds a question instead of an answer. Mystery is not the absence of intimacy, it's the art of unfolding. It tells him, you don't get all of me at once. But if you stay, if you see me, there's so much more I will show you. That's how a man falls, not just for your beauty, but for your depth. That's how he keeps returning, not because you've kept him guessing, but because your soul keeps calling him deeper. So stop worrying about saying the right thing. Stop trying to prove you're enough. Be willing to be quiet, to wait, to hold your truth without rushing to give it away. Because when a man feels that your mystery is not a wall, but a door, when he is invited to open, not entitled to enter, that's when desire turns to devotion. And that's when the connection becomes not just attraction, but alchemy. The masculine does not expand in response to need. It expands when it feels valued. At his core, a man does not want to be your solution. He wants to be your sanctuary, not because you can't stand on your own, but because when you stand beside him, something in both of you becomes stronger. There is a quiet instinct in the heart of every emotionally available man, the instinct to provide, to protect, to be useful. But this instinct cannot be activated by pressure or neediness. In fact, the more he feels needed out of fear or insecurity, the more he begins to retreat, not because he doesn't care, but because his energy is being used, not recognized. The difference may seem subtle, but emotionally, it's everything. Needing a man from a place of emptiness sounds like I can't do this without you. But valuing a man from your fullness sounds like I'm capable, but with you I rest deeper. One burdens, the other elevates. Carl Jung understood this in his writings on archetypes, that men don't come alive when they are forced to perform. They awaken when they are honored for their essence. That essence could be quiet as strength, grounded decision-making, fierce loyalty, or tender leadership, but it must be seen, not extracted. Recognition is the soul's permission slip. It says, you don't have to be perfect. I see the truth of who you are and I trust it. And when a man feels this, from a woman especially, from a woman who is steady in her own energy, it changes him. He becomes more present, more intentional, more masculine, not in performance, but in being. You'll see it in the little things. He'll reach for your hand before you ask. He'll take your comfort into account without being told. He'll show up more often, not because you asked, but because you saw him before he even knew he was ready to be seen. And that kind of desire, the desire born not from scarcity, but from deep acknowledgement, creates a bond that is impossible to replicate through tactics or games. Want a powerful example? Imagine this moment you're going through something hard, not breaking down, not falling apart, just holding something heavy. He steps in steady calm. You don't fall into his arms as if you've collapsed. Instead, you look him in the eye and say, "The way you hold your ground when everything around me is shaking, it anchors me." That's it. No plea, no need, just truth. In that moment, he doesn't feel responsible for you. He feels inspired by you. He feels invited to show up not as a fixer, but as a partner. That's where masculine energy thrives, because men don't stay for chaos. They stay where their energy has meaning. So if you want to awaken the best in a man, don't ask him to rescue you. Honor his strength, recognize his essence, and let your calm presence say, "You don't have to save me, just be with me." That's already more than enough. In today's world, that kind of mutual presence isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. The most powerful form of attraction doesn't come from trying to keep someone. It comes from being whole and choosing each other freely. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who isn't asking, "How do I make him stay?" but instead is quietly grounded in her own energy, simply asking, "Can I stay true to myself in his presence?" Because love that endures is never about ownership. It's about recognition. Carl Jung wrote, "Freedom is not doing what you want. It is becoming who you are." And nowhere is this truer than in love. Because when two people meet from their truth, not their wounds, not their insecurities, but their essence, something sacred begins to form. Not a bond built from fear, but a connection rooted in choice. When a man feels that a woman is not trying to trap him, fix him, or complete herself through him, but instead is offering herself fully as she is, from her own clarity and self-possession, it doesn't push him away. It pulls him in, not from duty, but from desire. This kind of love doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it calls silently but powerfully to the part of him that wants to rise without being asked, that wants to return without being summoned. And here's the truth, most aren't told freedom isn't the opposite of commitment. It's the foundation of it. When a man knows he can leave and still chooses to stay, that is where a love becomes real. Not because he's afraid of losing you, but because with you, he finds more of himself. That's what it means to love from wholeness, not needing someone to fill a gap, but inviting them to expand what already exists within. Imagine this, he pulls away, not out of disinterest, but because he's processing something deep. And instead of reacting in panic, instead of spiraling into fear, you hold your space. You return to your own rhythm, your own breath. You do not reach for control. You trust the bond. And when he returns, because men who value depth always return to where they feel most themselves, you don't greet him with resentment. You meet him with presence. And your energy says, "I never needed to hold you to keep you close. I trusted that what's real will always find its way back." That kind of energy doesn't just attract, it transforms. Because here's what many forget, even the most powerful men are seeking something they rarely name: a woman who can meet their freedom without flinching, who can dance with their wildness, not tame it, who doesn't just fit into their life, but expands it. So if you want to be unforgettable, don't offer your perfection, offer your presence. Don't trade your wholeness for a relationship, bring it with you. And when two whole people who are free, conscious, emotionally sovereign, choose each other again and again, not out of need, but out of deep, resonant recognition, that is the kind of love that doesn't fade. It doesn't settle. It evolves. because it was never about keeping each other. It was always about becoming more of who you are together. In a world that often rewards a surface, the most powerful thing you can offer is presence. Not performance, not perfection, but the quiet, unshakable energy of someone who is whole and no longer begging to be seen. We are conditioned to think love is earned through effort, saying the right words, looking the right way, needing someone enough that they'll finally stay. But real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that transforms, isn't about chasing. It's about choosing again and again from a place of freedom. Carl Jung taught that our relationships reflect what we carry inside our shadows, our hopes, our hidden longings. And so the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. When you meet your own depth, you stop needing others to fill the silence. You become the calm, not the chaos. So here's the truth. The right person doesn't want to be needed. They want to be recognized. They want to feel that their presence matters, not because they fix you, but because they see you and are seen in return. Let your relationships grow from that space. Honor instead of demand. Breathe instead of beg. Stay rooted instead of chasing. Because when two whole people meet from presence, not panic, that's when love becomes not just a feeling, but a force. One that doesn't cage, one that expands, and that is where the real magic begins.